Okay, so all the team, once again, thank you so much for joining us. So in today's session, if you remember in our last session, in fact, we have set up the Minikube basic cluster. And in today's sessions, we will be trying to basically create one deployments, and then later we will see how to troubleshoot and how to play with pod deployment and services and everything. So this will be the very fundamental after creation of the cluster, how we need to proceed further to basically work with the Kubernetes. Okay. So as we all know, Kubernetes is something is a platform for us to basically try out as a, let's say, test where you can play around with different commands. But as I mentioned last time, every single command, like in how we use in the Kubernetes, that may not work every single command. That means some of the commands may not work in Minikube, but still we can practice a lot and learn many things here, right? So yeah, let's get started. So as I mentioned, we have already Minikube set up. So what we do is that, so I have for our best practice, what I did was I created basically we have a commands here so that we can create a deployment. So whenever this is something in the Minikube, okay. So with the help of Minikube, we are going to create that is deployments. And now this is the name of the deployments, and now we are specifying name of the image. In my case, image is equal to nginx, and name of the tag basically, sorry, tag, this is a tag name basically, that is latest, so you can give anything. So this is basically to create the deployments. Once you create the deployments, then as we all know, we need to access the nginx also, right? So we need to access it and then see how nginx can be used. So this is the reason why we also need to expose with the help of unique kubectl. We can call as a kubectl or the kubectl boot works fine. I mean, you can call in many different ways. Okay, so maybe I prefer to call sometime kubectl, sometime I call as kubectl. Both are same. Okay, that is going to expose, and that is as I mentioned, this is basically deployment. So we are going to deployment, we are going to expose this deployment. Now name of the deployment is, that is what it is, right? Nginx pulse type. So as we all know, we have different type of service basically. This is one of the service, that is a node pod. And in my case, node pod, I have to expose the particular port, that is ET. So once we expose this thing, then what we do is, as we need to access the application, so obviously we need to get the URL also. But if you technically say when it comes to the Kubernetes and all, you don't need to define this one. These two things are okay, but here when it comes to Minikube, you must expose something like this: Minikube service deployment, basic name of the service. You can change this one, deployment name or basically service name, and the URL, that's the old URL. Okay, this is going to expose the service. But if you're actually working with our Minikube, let's say you are deploying the as your Kubernetes, in that situation you don't need to define this one. You can directly get the URL from this portal and make use of that. So what I'll do, I will first walk you through with the help of this one, kubectl, and then I will show you how to troubleshoot and everything. Okay. All right. So first, what I'll do, as I mentioned, I'm going to copy paste this one because it will be easy for you guys also to follow along. Let me clear all the screens. Now, if I type here kubectl, if I type cuddle get to check the pod basically. Before checking the pod, you can check the deployment also. Okay, deploy, or you can call as deployment or deploy. Both are same. Okay, and my particular name and mean namespace basically. In my case, whenever we create any applications or any deployment, we have a deployment like default namespace call as a default. So I'm going to type same as it is. That means now basically I'm trying to check deployment in particular namespace, that is a default. Now as you can see here, no resource found in the default namespace, right? So what is namespace? Is namespace is a way to basically organize your resources to deploy, and basically you can give some permissions certain user or group like that. So you can give a set, you can set also network policy and all. So how the port can be communicated between the different port. So we can define with the help of what you call, if you have a different namespace for specific environment or specific use cases. So as I mentioned, we don't have. Let me create one with the help of kubectl. I'm going to create deployment. In my case, I given name as nginx, Now I can give a name of the image. That is what it is. That is Nginx. So I will type it. So as you can see here, deployment apps slash Nginx pulse. That is your deployment name. It is got created. So how do we check that one whether it is got created? So with the help of same thing, you go up. As I mentioned, we have a default namespace. Let's say without, if you don't know the namespace by default, what you can do, you can just type get, sorry, kubectl get deploy. You can give as deploy or deployment, both basically works fine. So it depends on the how good, I mean how shortcut you want to use it, depends on your choice. So as you can see here, as I mentioned, we do have one deployment. That is the name, that is what we given here, if you remember right here. Deployment name given Nginx pulse. This is what we can see in Nginx pulse. And if you can just see the state, by default it is showing as 1. What is 1? Basically 1 out of 1 slash 1. That means we have in the deployments we had defined only one pod. That means only one container basic which will be running, right? Pod will be running in the container. So that is why it is. But in case if you want to scale it or down this thing, you can do so. Okay. But yeah, let's go the next one. Now coming to the this thing deployments, as I mentioned, we have created the deployment. Now we need to expose the service also. In order to expose the service, just like before, what we can do is that we have a command now, same thing, kubectl expose. Instead of create, now we are going to expose. In my case, again, I have to specify the name of the deployment. In my case, that is why deployment I mentioned, because type of the service. In my case, this is the name of the deployment, right? So I given pulse. Now this is the service type, basically double dash and then hyphen, I mean, um, type, basically the service type. Basically in my case it is a node port, and in my case there's a port 80, that is Nginx, as we all know, right? So Nginx listens on port 80. So this is what we have defined as port 80 here. So let me copy this also as well. Sorry, my bad, it's not got copied properly. Maybe let me copy once again. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to expose the service that is a deployment name Nginx pulse. So as you can see now, service, that is Nginx pulse, this is name of the service also for particular deployment, and it is got exposed. Now after exposing, we need to basically access the application also, right? Because this is Nginx, so that means this is like a web server, right, where we can access anywhere as long as you have access to the particular this thing. Now let us do that. So in order to do that, so this is basically a mini cube, right? So we need to define a mini cube, and the name, this is service, and name of the service, that is a, this is what be given name, if you remember here, right? Here while exposing, this name given, sorry, not this one, this is my bad. You can change this one, Nginx pulse. Okay, minikube, basically deployment pulse known this service. Okay, minikube service and name of the service, this is the name be given, and we are going to get the URL. So as I mentioned, if you are working with the normally in the Kubernetes, you don't need to do that. You can directly access from the portal. You can get the URL from there itself. But in our case, it is a mini cube, so we need to use like that. But that functionality wise works fine. Now, as you can see here, there is a HTTP slash double colon. This is the IP address, basically local, and this is a port that got exposed. Because you are using the Docker driver on Linux, the terminal needs to be open to run it. So that means by default now to exposition. Now if you want to access the application that is Nginx, you can just copy and then you can browse anywhere. Let's say I can, let me move this one, submit. Oh, sorry, my bad, let me move. Okay, so now if I basically open here, now let me open in different tab. So I'm just copy paste the URL of the particular Nginx that is got exposed with a particular port number. Now if you expose, now you can see here. welcome to Nginx, because this is from where it is coming with the help of deployment. Because in the deployment we have defined here as an Nginx while creating the deployments. This is just like a one particular application that this is running right now, and then in order to access the application that is Nginx, we are exposing the IP address. Sorry, Nginx we are exposing the deployments, basically service name call with this name, and the type as the node pod. So to access this one, we need a URL, right? So that is why we are getting the URL from here. So we are done here. That means you can see now it is showing here welcome message as well for the Nginx, right? So you can consider now your application works fine. But imagine now your this can be a different situation, like sometimes may not the port may not be come up. If you remember last week we had an issue, so we tried to troubleshoot, but there was some network issue. So we try to find out how to troubleshoot, what is the best practice to troubleshoot, what is the like some of the basic command that we need to know, right? So we will try to understand in today's session as well. So what we'll do, as we all know, right now it is working fine. Let me come out from that. So what I want to do is that I want to play around with the commands now, basic commands. What is the first command I need to do? Let's say because if you see here, this is the cluster, right? Minikube cluster. Now, if you go here, we do have a different commands depends on the situations. Let's say something called as view, like viewing and finding resources. So if you want to play around and see things like that, maybe you can play around with these commands. So the first one, I'll go some of the commands. That is the kubectl get services. That is what we did it already. Basically, if you remember, we created a service, right? Here we have created a service here. I think somewhere here, yeah, service. Here we expose the service. How can we access the know the service name? So if you want to check this one, just copy paste this one. That is a kubectl get services. I mean, now you can see there are two services. The one that is a Kubernetes, that is a cluster IP with this IP cluster IP, and this is a no external. So this is for the minikube. Second one is what we be doing, right? So many Nginx pulse is what we given, and the service type is given as a node port, and this is the name of the sorry IP name. I mean IP address, and this is a port that we expose it, 80, and it's mapped a node port. So if you see 4 minutes ago it got created. So now we know everything good. That means we know now how to see the service basically which we created or which we expose it. Now what is the other way to define? Let's say I given services. Do we have any short name? Yes, we do have. So what is the short name? We can use the SBC. What is the SBC? Is nothing but it is again a service. So we can use something. So whatever you see here services, you can see with the help of SBC also. Try to use short name instead of the big name, right? So this is also fine. Now this is the first thing. Now we have understood. But when it comes to the real time, right? We do have a lot of services for different namespace. So as I mentioned, namespace is basically is a platform that enables us to basically isolate our resources to certain requirement. That means if you are into the development, you can have one group of development where you can give permission to particular group, and you can associate or give permission to namespace level, let's say the reader level, or maybe permission you can give, or maybe right access. So depends on the situation, you can give a permission. Basically it's just like a resource group where it isolates all your resources within the resource group. For certain user you can give certain access, is what it is. For now you can think in your Azure, I mean Kubernetes namespace cases. Okay, so that's what it is. Now second thing what we need to understand, as I mentioned, if I type here get ns sorry namespace, is what we will discussing, right? Now you can see there are so many namespace. The first namespace, that is a default. Second thing, we have a minikube, sorry, kube node list, and a kube public, kube system, Kubernetes dashboard. What are these all? These all are basically your namespaces. How do we know these namespaces? Because we try to list all the namespace. You can give as a namespace or anything also works fine. Like you can give as namespaces or namespace. Sorry, namespace or namespaces. Okay, so both works fine. But question is, how do we know which is the correct one for particular deployment, right? So this is the reason why I was saying you, whenever you deploy any resources or any application in your Kubernetes, by default, if you do not define I'm saying if by default, if you do not define by default, the Kubernetes itself will create one namespace called with this name. That is your default name. Namespace name itself default. Okay. Same thing. Along with that, so Kubernetes also create something called as service account. Now, so what is service account? Basically, to access the resource between different resources. Let's say you want to access the key wall from the Kubernetes or secrets or any other, right? No, we should have some certain common user that can access certain applications or maybe resources. This is why we were using this service connections. Sorry, service account. How do we know? Do we get that one? If you type here service account, you can see default. The service account name itself default. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, we have namespace also. We can give a namespace. We can give. Do we have any short name for these namespaces or namespace? The answer is yes. We do have short name for namespace for every almost for every resource. We do have a short name. Say for example, I want to get a short name for the namespace or namespaces. You can simply type as N stand for name, S star for space. That means namespace. Whenever you type NS, that means namespace. You can enter. Now same what you can see the namespace, all namespace you can see. Similar way, if you're dealing with a service account, this also we have a short name. S star for service, S star for account, right? Service, the two different meaning, right? Service and then account, right? So S stand for account. So we can take SA. That means service account. That also we can see, right? That means we have understood some of the basic commands that we need to play around. Okay. Till now it is good. Okay. Now let me go back to the maybe let's say port. Let me check the port now. How to access the port? I mean, how to basically see the port. Kubectl something that you need to always type. Get. I can type a PODS ports. No issue. It will work fine. See. Now, as I type ports, I can see only one port that is got created. How do we basically get this name? Let's say we have engineers. How do we get this name, right? If you see this name is very long, right? But from where this name is coming from actually? How do we get this name port name? Because we have not created port. In fact, we have created deployment. But how the name is something this in this format it is coming? How do we know that? So we need to understand one thing here is that whenever you deployment in your deployment, right? Whenever you define to basically try to create a port, sorry, basically the deployment, you need to define the number of replicas. That means how many port, identical port basically that you want to create. In my case, by default in the deployment, we have specified as one. So this is the reason why it is showing as one deployment name. Question is how the name, how the sorry, how the Kubernetes assigned a name like this. So we need to understand. First thing, how do we understand? If you have a multiple port also, you have to identify with the this thing. But on your left side, till here, right? Till here, I mean from here, pulse, right? Till here, it is your deployment name. If you remember, whenever when we created the deployment name, this is the name we given, right? And what is this? This is your replica's name. What is this? This is your basically pod unique name. Now together it will be easy to identify. That means we can now easily identify. Okay, this particular pod belongs to this deployment, and for this particular replicas and this particular pod name. That means together it is called as pod name. I hope this is clear. Okay. Now second thing is the state basically ready. That means 1 out of 1 means we have only one port. It is running. As you can see the status of the pod as well. And is it got started? If it is got started, you can see how. Then also when it got created, you can see this age also. So hope this is clear. Now second thing is as I mentioned, we always every single current is almost we do have a lot of short commands here. So instead of pod, you can use a pod also. No issue. It will work fine. See. Instead of pod also, you can also use a much more smaller. You can just use a POD here. Same command works fine. It is all about how you want to play around or how basically which command you prefer to use. That's what it is. Okay, but functionality wise, both are same. All are good, same. Fine. Now we are good with the pod, but normally, technically, if I say, um, This is the this thing, right? If I have, let's say, if I have multiple namespace, how do we know which namespace it got this, right? That is why I have to specify the name. That means name of the namespace. In my case, that is the default namespace we have, right? Now, if I type here, we have this thing. Now, same thing I can see, but this is always try to use as default because this will help us to filter only for specific namespace. Because in your real project or maybe in your real this thing, right? You may have a lot of namespace, maybe 100 plus 50 plus, you have a number of namespaces, so it is difficult for you to basically filter out if you don't know the namespace, because with a similar name port you may have a different port or namespace. But another way to basically use, if you don't know the namespace itself, we can use something called as a capital A. What is capital A? All namespace. That means it is, you cannot give a small letter. If you give a small, it will fail because there's nothing meaning of small letter. So always know the case sensitive sometime. So if you use this thing, we can see this is the big, I mean capital letter. Now it will come now. See that means what basically we are. I'm trying to basically get all the port for all the port for from all the namespaces, because the capital A, that means for all namespace. That means that is why I can see so many namespaces there. Sorry, basically port for different purposes. This all serve in different purposes that you can see now. This particular default namespace has only one port, and it is ready and running fine all. Similar way, we have another namespace. This is used for another port, different purpose. We have understood, right, this one. Now let's go the next one. We have understood the port. Now if you take a reference here, uh, like this what I was referring in fact, so we can use this way also, ports double dash all namespace. This way also I can give. If I give same thing, I can see the all namespaces for the. Okay, now if I remove this thing, you can see here same thing. I use short letter instead of this one using all the big letter. I mean, it is difficult sometimes to remember because I had to use a dash. Then I have to use the, I mean, hyphen, then all, then namespaces, right? So instead, I can simply use this one. Much easier, right? Then second thing, we have something called as a kubectl get ports and a o white. What is o white? List all ports, the namespace, and more detail. Basically, whenever you want to play around and see to understand basic mode about particular port, we need to basically make use of this one. So let me enter copy paste this one. Get ports dash o white, right? So now what basically we can see here, what will help you basically to give some more details as compared to just port if you use a o white. Now first thing what we need to understand here is here of the IP. Normally we don't see the IP address, right? But here we can see IP address and node also see node, because as I mentioned, for whenever we create any deployment, the pod basically will be deployed in certain to in the particular node. Basically that is a minikube node. Okay, and that's the thing. Now same thing for the deployment also. I for one I can check the deployment also. Deployment I think I have already checked it, but I can still show you. Maybe for that, right? I can use deployment. You can give if you want to just see deployment. This also works fine, no issue. Or maybe otherwise you can use s. This works fine. Otherwise you can use just deploy. All are same. Try to use a short name instead, right? Deploy this. Deploy nothing. Deployment. Now it is only one. Now same thing if you want to see this also in the more details. Now you can use o dash o, then we can white, give you much more detail basically. So you can see, let's say when this thing available is in the container name. This is the name we given, container name, and the image, that is what we will be using, and the selector basically app nginx pulse. Basically this selector I will explain in some time. Okay. Okay, now this is what we have understood. Deployment also we have, port we understood. Yeah, we have understood this also, right? Now let's come down. Now we have something called as the describe command with the verbose output. So describe, why do we need to use? Describe can be used many ways. So let's say if I use a, now if I use this describe, um, I can first, I can make use of this thing. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, okay. So fine. So what we will do next? Um, this is good. Now let me go to the next. Okay, let next is describe. So why do we use describe first thing? Describe would give us much more details as compared to just white as well. So maybe if you want to play, you can just type get cube cuddle describe. What you want to describe is what it is. You need to mention. So in my case, if I want to mention the pod, okay. If you want to mention the pod, I want to describe the pod, POD or PO just pod. I can give a select the particular pod. This is I think one of the pod name, right? So I can copy paste it. Now, so you can see here. First thing that means it is going to describe it. What we need to understand here, we are using kubectl describe pod, PO mean pod, name of the pod. This is the name of the pod full name. I have tried it. You can also define if you want to mention one more dash n and then particular namespace name. That best practice use this one. That means I'm trying to filter out with particular namespace within namespace for particular pod. In the real time, this is how you have to define it because there will be multiple, then it will fail otherwise. The command sometime. Now, yeah. So now as you can see here, first thing what we need to understand here is that this is the name of the pod. As you can see name, this is basically a pod name. This is a namespace. That means this particular pod belongs to a particular name, this particular namespace. Priority nothing, service account also, as I mentioned, whenever you create any deployment thing, by default there should be one service connection, sorry, service account should be created for you. And this can be default, but normally you can also create additional in the real time base. You will create separate namespace as well as service account. Okay, and this is the node, because this minikube to run or this cluster to run, there is something called as a minikube. We have a cluster node, right? That has to be running. So that is why it is given this name minikube and with this IP. And this all detail you can see. Nothing much to explain. You can check the IP address, and then this is basically container details, container ID, and then image that we use for this particular port. That is nginx. And what is the image that we be using it? That also we can see here, and then state also we can see, and now just whether ready or not we can see this also, whether it got started or not we can see. The down, if you come a little more down, you have to understand one more thing is that under mount sometime, if you see mount where slash run slash secrets Kubernetes service account from you, this is going to be basically mounted. Now under conditions nothing much here, but then we need to understand port ready to start a container. This board everything is fine all through, port schedule, container ready, ready initialize, everything we can see here. And volumes here, right? We have it, but here also nothing much to discuss. If you come a little bit down, maybe let me check. Yeah, here. If you maybe take a look, normally whenever pod is not running for any reason, right? That means your right now pod is working, so we can access the nginx also. So if you see here, right, we were able to access the nginx, this one, right? So this was able to access, that means application working fine. Imagine now that your application, when you create a deployment, the service try to access was not accessible because there was some issue while basically creation of your deployment. That means while you run the deployment commands, that time it is fail. So how can you troubleshoot? The first thing is that check the status of the pod. Okay, so how can you check the status of the pod? Let's say I know my deployment name, right? So it is if you don't know also, as I mentioned, how to check, I will show you once. 1 second, I'll show you. You can type kubectl get, because we are talking about the deployment issue, right? Not the port. You can check the port level as your deployment level. First, if you're using the deployment level, check the deployment shell, creating the resources. It's just deploy. Then you can specify particular namespace. That is your default. First thing is checking this one. What do you have to check here? This is a deployment name. Check the status of this one, because in particular deployment, while we define, we only specify one port, because replicas mentioned as one, so it is showing as ready out of one out of one, right? So and available. Otherwise, it should be zero if it is fail. So imagine now here it will be zero out of one. That means there should be some issue, and available it will be zero. So in this case, what you have to do is that first thing, you need to get the port details, because this is deployment. So now you know the namespace. So what you do first, go to deployment, because you're with the help of deployment you created, right? Get deployment, get a name, and I verify whether it is running or not. Deployment is having, let's say, issue. Instead of one, it's, let's say, zero. That means there is some issue. What I can do is that I can simply go back here. Instead of the deployment, sorry, deployment I got already. Deployment I have verified. This is the name of the deployment. Now I need to get a port. So in this case, you can type here PO. That means I'm trying to filter now in this particular namespace, right? Namespace, how many whatever ports I'm using or having it, I can see over here. So now it will help me to get the proper port name. This is a proper port name. Okay. Now as you can see here, ready one out of one. That means it is ready running everything one. So imagine now this is fail. Some issues coming. Okay. Let's say container image was not able to pull for some reason, right? Could be network issue, or maybe your some other system issue, or it could be any other issue. So how do we troubleshoot is what we are trying to see now. So as I mentioned, first thing, do that, get the port name. After confirming the deployment, I will copy this port name, sorry, port name. Then second thing is that I need to go to the check the status also, if it is status as ready, or this one also, or stop or not running or anything, right? Check this one. Let's say there is some issue coming. What you do, second thing is there, go back to here. You have to type, instead of the get, you have to describe now what issue, where went wrong. That you have to check that. So with the help of describe port. Now as I mentioned, I know the port name, because I cannot check everything, right? I have to specify to my particular port that has issue. So this is the reason why I'm verifying. I'm trying to say now, please describe the port. This is the name of the port in particular namespace. Simple. Now I enter. As soon as I enter, first thing what I need to understand here is, as I just shown you something before, this all you can see. First thing, check the namespace, whether you are in the right namespace, whether you have permission to deploy your deployment in this namespace or not. Sometimes maybe because of the namespace does not have the permission, can also fail. That also keep in mind. Second thing, check the service account, whether you have used some other service account or not. Okay, these some of the things that you can check. And IP address is okay, not an issue. Come down a little bit. Your major task to basically notice is that here. Take a look here. Events. Under event sections, here check. This is where whatever commands you're running for every single executions, when you run the deployment, right? That time, whatever commands you're running, everything gets initialized and stored as an event here. So wherever there is an issue, so you can see the error also. If you remember last time we were having issue, there is some network issue, so we got started. So that time we had the issue here. Now let me show you first thing. Under event sessions, type we have. Type means what kind of issue, basically origin or this thing. Then region and the age and from and the message. These some of the components that we need to understand. First thing, as the part of the type, we have a normal. Here we can see the schedule. That means they got schedule this minutes ago, and this is basically from the default scheduler. If you remember, we have learned something called the schedule, right? Cube scheduler. What is the work of that? It is going to schedule whichever whenever you try to create a new pod or whenever new pod gets created, that time the scheduler will try to identify a particular pod where in which basically cluster or maybe node it has to be deployed, right? So they will try to identify. So this is the reason why this particular default scheduler work is to basically identify the node where to deploy for particular pod. So in this case, if you see the message, successfully assign a default nginx this particular pod into minikube. This is basically a cluster, right? Worker nodes. You can call as for now. You can think of a worker nodes or maybe node pool. Okay, you can call as a this thing also node pool also. Okay. Now that means you can. That means his work is to basically see identify and assign to particular cluster in particular basic node. So here, if you see, no issue, they have done it their job. No issue here. Second thing is what? Pulling. After this thing, they'll pull the what they are going to pull the image basically. Whose work it is? Kubelet. Kubelet is basically agent, right, to interact with the different services. So his work is to basically things check everything's working fine according to whatever we have defined, right? There, what is the work? They will pull the images with the help of this kubelet, and that is what it is. Pulling images. This is also no issue here. As you can see, no issue here also. That means till now it is no issue. Third thing, again it is also normal type. Finally it got pulled, and again same person. If you can see here, successfully pull image, that is the nginx, in this many seconds, and so, including waiting. Image size is this much MB. That means the kubelet also pull the images without any issue. But technically, if there is any issue, let's say maybe because of the credentials or because of the network or because of the permissions, then instead of the successful, you can get an error, fail, or maybe error, something like that. You can get an error, depends on the situation or maybe issue, right? So you may get, in my case, it is no issue. So works fine. Let's go next. Next also, finally, after pulling this thing, this thing, it got created. What is got created? Container got created. Kubelet, because here created container, that is the nginx container got created. Once it is created, what is the next? It is going to basically start. So you need to start, right? Because container need to start, then only your application will be running up and running, right? So you can see here also. Then after creation successfully, then they are going to start the container, that is with the help of kubelet. Then you can see the message or started container, that is nginx. So this is the process running in the background, that we don't see that. But then whenever somebody says any issue, come here, check. One way of basically check the status of the pod, whether it is running or not running. What is the message you try to understand and come to the particular what is it, event sessions and understand where the issue is. Then you can easily identify that way. Okay, okay, that is the thing. Now, okay, we have understood this thing. Now let me take you a little bit in maybe see if I can show you. Kubelet, no, okay. Yeah, you can also note also if you want to select the node. Basically, why to select the node? Basically, if you have multiple nodes, if you want to see also, you can see, let's say, for my particular pod where it is got deployed, right? You can type kubectl get nodes. You can use a nodes or node, a particular namespace. That is a default. Now, as you can see here, this is basically name of the node, the status of the node that is ready, and the role of this node, it has a control plane. So as I mentioned, we have control plane and a node pool, right? So this is the control plane side. So it is working. This is got created 99 seconds. This is a version. So this will help us to see the details basically. Now, if you want to see more in details, you can basically refer the documents, the other things to play around if you want to, all right? So PV not required, service not required. Yeah, if you want to see describe would help you to just like others. it will also help you. Maybe you can type. Now I can see and describe. It is going to describe details, everything complete, configuration details, what is there, what is not there. I can have a look once. And like if you see here, describe notes. This specific name is a minikube. This role is the control plane, and you can see the levels, annotation, the creation stamp, 10, false, unscheduled, false, minikube, IP, everything we can see, right? So this will give you the broader informations that something you may need to check this also. So maybe if you want to see, you can check every single information, right? Let's say default. In default, we have this namespace. What is the CPU? How much requests and the CPU limit, memory requests and memory rate is everything we can see there also. So this will give you broader information if you at all need this information. So that is one way. If you don't know, maybe let me just get notes. If this is node name. Now if I use thing, if I want to describe, I can make use of the same thing. Instead of get, I can use the describe nodes, right? Now you can see also this is for particular distance. So this also will help us to basically troubleshoot also if there is an issue. Sometime because of the node does not have the enough sufficient memory or maybe this thing, that time that can also be caused that you cannot deploy your application. So there could be different situation would have a different scenarios, right? So that also. Okay, next what we can do is that okay, we also have a something called events. If you want to get events to check the particular events for particular port. Now we have described that we have seen many things, but if you want to check the events, so how can we do that? You can type kubectl. Let me choose this thing again. Okay, maybe I can remove this one. Kubectl get events. You can see here. Now kubectl get events will help you to in a particular namespace. So if you want to have everything, basically you can see all the events, how it is got image got pulled and everything we can see for particular port. Maybe if you want to see for particular port also, we can check that one. Let's say we have one port here. Let me check if I can see with one port. Okay, no problem. I think let me remove one something. Okay, no problem. So as you can see, right, this whatever is there we can see this way also. Events later we can check. If you want to also see more some more details, like you can type kubectl by short, metadata, time span. So this is basically another advanced so what do you call commands that you can also practice if you want to. Okay, then what else we have? Yeah. So if you have some thank you get image, if you want to update the resources, you can use skip kernel set image, then deployment, name of the deployment, and the image that you're going to use it. You can update. If you want to roll out the image, you can use the history. If you want to undo something, you can do this also. Every single comments are there. Your means documented well documented. You can just refer this one. Okay. Then second thing is that this is normally we don't need to use this one for now. You can ignore this one. Yeah, so this is something scaling the resource. Maybe sometime we need to use the resource replicas as this thing. Now we can check if you want to. Maybe let me show you once. Let me clear the screen. Now if I don't know the replicas of a particular deployment, we can also verify that. How do we verify? If you type kubectl get replica set. Okay, if you see here, what is a replica set basically? It is a basically setup deployment. I mean setup basically pod. That means identical pod. That so when you mention replicas as one, that means only one pod. If you set replicas as 10, that means same identical 10 different pod will be created for you or defined according to that. So as you can see, this is a pod for particular this thing, right? We have so same thing also you can check with a particular namespace. This also because this all belong to particular namespace, right? So default one. So now I can see. Now we can see this is the this thing default. Now let me copy these names on this port name. Now as I mentioned, this is basically to give you idea. But if you notice, this is a replica's name. Now let me show you uh, deployment deploy. Okay, what did I type wrong? Okay, spelling wrong. Sorry. Now let me type the port. Why I'm typing here? I want to make you understand better. Okay, deploy. Let's say I want to type port or PO. So what we need to understand here is that first thing is this to define or check a replica set. Replicas is nothing but, as I told you, replica set means defining the set of identical port basically. That means in your deployment, let's say if you want to define a minimum is 10 port and a maximum is 20 port. In this case, we can set the replicas maximum, minimum, and maximum. Okay. And second thing is that this is what we can check with the particular namespace. As I mentioned, we need to check with particular namespace. You can check. In my case, it is on one port. Basically, this is replica set name, not the port name. This is the replica set name. If you see here, because we define a replica set, not the port name. So, second thing is here to get the deployment. That means in this case only we are deploying, get the deployment details. Again, this also, this is the name that we have defined it, right? Deployment. And now we can see also port level. So one thing what we need to understand, I have already told you that whenever you create a deployment, there is one naming standard, right? So if you take a look, as I told you, the first one, what we see here, it is a deployment name because this is part of the deployment, not the replicas or maybe port level. This is part of the deployment. So the first thing what you see is a deployment. How do we know deployment? Maybe if you check the deployment, you see here, this is the name we have. If you check here, right? Get deploy, then particular namespace. This is a name given. That means it should start with the deployment. Second thing, whatever you see here, this is till here. That means from here to till here, it is a replica set name. You can check here maybe. You can see replica set. The last number is this. This till here, it is a deployment name. At the last, it is a replica set name. Together, it is a replica set name. That is 7D. Sorry, D7. Last at last 6D. You can check here. D7 last number 6D. Till here, or we can call as together. This call as a replica set because you can see here under this replica set. Similar way, coming when comes to the deployment as a report, together they call as a port name. Now this is a naming standard. So together it will be port namespace. So port will be always derive the naming from the deployment and as well as the replica set. They have to map together. Okay, this is the thing. Okay, so next what we can do, let me check if I can show some more. Now, yeah, second thing is that basically if you want to play around with the different comments, let's see, you can see here, right? This thing white and we have a O and white, everything we can check this output basically, but you don't need to use much this one, trust me. Okay, but what you need to understand is that how to work, what is the difference between port, replica set, services and deployment. So I hope till now you have at least understood some of the idea, right, how to make use of these comments. So second thing what you can also do is that whatever we have discussed today, right, apart from this one, whatever we were doing, we were using. This is the basically not a YAML syntax. This is basically not a declarative, right? So this is called as an imperative way. So imperative in the sense you basically run the commands and with the help of commands that you are running your things. But in your real time, when you actually work in the company or the project, they'll be using something called as a Helm. But before Helm, we also need to know how to write the YAML file for particular Kubernetes. So I have discussed, in fact, last time also, given not exactly in detail, but then I have given you some idea how to make use of this thing. If you remember last time, I was talking about the BS code that something you can make use of that. You can install it, and then maybe you can run this one. Like maybe let's say I will talk about the deployment. Let me create one file here, and this all YAML will be always deployment.yaml ml or YAML or YAML. Okay. So now here, you, after type with the extension of .yaml, and before that, try to install the Nginx. Sorry, not Nginx. What do you call that? Extension, right? If you come here, somewhere here, yeah, here, extension logo you can see, right? Come here, you type here, Kubernetes. There are Kubernetes, different type of Kubernetes we have. Let me show you one. Kubernetes. As you can see, this is a Kubernetes official from Microsoft, and we also have a Azure Kubernetes. Okay, service. So it depends on this thing. Yeah, I can also install it if you want. So if you want, you can install 2 3 things that will help you to basically write your code faster. So we have template also. I can make use of this also. So there are so many other extensions that can be used. So you always check the review some normally in the extension nobody reviews it, give the reviews, but then you can see how many people got download this one. Okay. So fine, I have got this everything ready. Now let me come to the point that is the deployment.yaml. So as I mentioned, deployment. So basically now we need to understand how we can make use of what you call something called as a extension. That is what we have installed now as a plugin, right? So you simply type deployment. So there are different type of deployment teams. So if you can notice here, K8s deployment, cube.deployment, the deployment. This is all what is this? This is all different basically. Basically we have different vendor, different providers, as well as different authors, right? Authors means when you install the kind of the extension, there will be different person. So know the right one and see what is the basically depends on your requirement, which one you need that you have to understand it. Even something I need to check it. Maybe you can just run this one first. You can see whether you want this one. See, boom, whatever I type automatically. This looks much big or this thing, right? So let's see if I don't need that, maybe I can go with the second one, cube deploy. So we can go through everything, what kind of things are there. Maybe if you don't want this also, you can go others as well. Let me go with the default one, maybe create as deployment. Maybe I prefer to use minikube. This is basically very, oh, sorry. This is for now very simple. Okay. So what we need to understand here, whenever we are having this is called as this is normally called as declarative, and the another one, if you remember, here we were using everything commands, right? From sorry, where is that? Here whatever we are running, all all creation of the images or everything, right? Mean deployment, this is all done something called as a uh, imperative. That means you simply define the commands with the help of kernel and run the commands and it will get deployed. But then in the real time, this will not help us actually. So we need to basically define as a code base that is with the help of YAML and then make use of them. So this is what we need to understand. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to cover everything. I will just give some idea about this one. We'll have a session for this as well. Maybe next week we'll discuss. For now, just on the high level, I'll give you some idea. So as I told you, you can make use of extension. Now, the first thing is that whenever you're writing any YAML file, especially for Kubernetes, we need to remember 4 things. First thing is the API version. Second thing is the kind. Third thing is the metadata. Four, that is your specs or specification. if you don't define these four things, somewhere your kind of configuration may not work properly. Even I see people sometimes even the API version may not sometimes define in all cases, but it is always good practice to define the YAML. I mean the API version as well. So make use of this thing also. Okay. So coming to the version of the API, this this is again depends on the service type we use. Let's say if you can see here, this is basically for the deployment. This is why the API version is something like a apps slash version 1 v1. But if you type some other service type, I mean if I use some other service type, let's say POD, let's that import. Now you can see API version got changed. Instead of the apps 1 slash apps slash b1, it is just a b1. Why it is so? Because every single service can have, I'm saying can have, it should not be always different one. It can have a different API version. That's what it is. Sometimes it can be app slash by, sorry, b1. Sometimes it can be just a b1. That's it, or b2 depends on the API. Okay, but every single services will not be the same. It will be differ. Okay, hope this is clear. Now second thing is what it is a deployment, because we do have a different type of service. How do we know if we don't define that kind of the service? How do we know what the service belongs to? Now by understanding the kind of the service, it helps us to understand that okay, this is belong to deployment, right? Then metadata is another kind of the, as we all know, metadata has some information about certain resource. In our case, basically under metadata name, what is the name of this metadata, that my application name, this can be changed according to your requirement now. So maybe if you want to change, you can change. So now specs is something, as I mentioned, that is about your specification about your containers basically. Now if you see here, if you see under specs, we have a mesh level, then we have a name of this thing, and the template we have, labels we have, the under spec is what we have all the container details, that is whatever name you can give, and image name you can give here, then this host, and this is the limit I can set. What is the memory size, what is the CPU size, I can define what is the port for particular container to listen on, or which particular, let's say if I use a Nginx, you have to define the port accordingly, or maybe any other port, depends on that. Same way, if you're going with the uh, like port level, API version would be b1, and the kind as port metadata, so and so specs, everything will be coming here. But more thing what you see here, this is, as I mentioned, this is container level, right? Because on the container shell, your pod is going to run, and one pod is nothing but one particular application running. Maybe spec can also have multiple running in a particular container. Sorry, application. But then it is not best practice to use. So always try to use a particular pod. You just try to use one application. But if they are using a if they are using a different purpose, then yes, you can go ahead. In one particular pod, you can use different application, two different application also. That is also possible, but not a best practice to use. So okay, now you can see the configuration of the container and the environment set variable, what is the port, what is the volume on, everything we can see everything. Okay, this is the thing. Now same thing, if I talk about the replica set, let's see if I don't want to do that. You type this replica set, you type. Now also there. But trust me, only having this code will not make you perfect. You still need to practice yourself and understand how the syntax of this YAML basically works, as well as from how they are interconnected. Let's say if I say now about mesh level, what is mean by mesh level? If I say selector, what is selector means to you? If I say template, what is say template means to you? So we need to understand, this is all depends on the resource that we deploy, or sorry we create. It may varies this thing, but then concepts should be clear enough for you. Okay, so this is what, maybe in the next session I will talk more about this each service, why we use, how we can interconnect. Let's say if you remember just before the class, I mean during the class, we have discussed about this one, right? We have created the deployment, and then we have exposed the service, and then we are trying to access the service with the help of this thing. this thing. That's what we will be doing. But same way, now if I had to do it with the help of what is called something called as a imperative way, sorry, declarative way, right? Declarative way. So then it's difficult for you. So in this case, what we have to do is that, so it is easy for us because I can simply by seeing I can deploy, but then we cannot see the every single details, right? So but if you want to see this kind of configuration, if you have to do manually and update, means you should thoroughly having good understanding, then only you can update as well, not just knowing things but then also know how it functions internally, right? So as I mentioned, we are going to cover this as well, and then we will talk more about this service maybe next weekend. For now, maybe yeah, we can see here. One thing I would like to show you, one more thing is that if you want to see details of the YAML, that means whatever I see here, right, deployment. Same thing, if you want to see that is already created, how do we check that also? I want to show you something. Now, this is something that you can also see. You can use, oh, wait, white or OEML say. Okay. So what did I type here? I simply type kubectl get deploy. Basically, I'm trying to get the deployment, or could be a pod, anything that in my case it's a deployment. So basically, whatever it is there in the YAML syntax or maybe YAML format, those all details I can also see basically. This will help us understand while configuring the particular deployment, what are the parameters that need to be defined, what is the possible value. So this will help us much, basically what is it, much more understanding into that particular this thing. Let's say now you can see the API, as I mentioned, API we have. In my case, it's a version 1b1. Now, so depends on this thing. Second thing is this is item, this is additional information. If you want, you can, this is something additional first, but this is something you need to understand. Okay, second thing is that metadata. Come now. So you can see kind, you can see metadata, deployment, right? Then metadata, then this all within that we have something called as a specs, and the specs also something called as a strategy. We have a an application name nginx, and the ruling update also we have what is the max source and max enable level 25%, all is ruling update. This all we will discuss in detail in the next sessions. Okay, but for now understand this is something possibly we can check this way also. Okay, so yeah team, so maybe we'll wind up here for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you in the next session. Till then, take care. Bye bye.